than just radio. So jump in the chat room if you can. I am just about to that. This is show number 360 something.
9.
Talking about giants. I've lost count, Dave. 369?
Correct.
960 and 300. 369. Wow, that's awesome. 369 shows. That's a lot of shows. And yes, we are going to talk about giants. A fascinating subject. It's on air, online, and on your smart device. So grab an app to listen anywhere. And we mean that anywhere in the multiverse. Or listen at home on the greatest tabletop digital radio, which sort of shrinks that down a bit. If you miss Solaris' show, shame on you, shame on me. You don't have to miss it. You don't have to miss our show. It only costs $5.95, I want to say, a month. $5.95 a month. That's US dollars. To access Freedom Slip's archives and check out her shows, all the shows of every show host. And it was Nancy Hopkins that was on the show, talking about Shungite. And you can check out her shows there. I often catch her afterwards when I get the chance. Sometimes I do manage to dial in, and it's always very interesting. She always has guests. She has been gracious enough a few times to come onto our show and be our guest, because she is a great interviewee. She's a great interviewer, but she is an equally great interviewee. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, from that is the Darug people, and for Dave,
it's the Dark and Young.
And we would like to pay our respects to elders past, present, and future. And no, this is not a gimmick. This is acknowledging that we are not the first by a long shot. And we are probably not the best by a long shot either. We've been playing, I should say, fast and loose with the earth, such as it is. And I'm talking specifically about Western civilization here. We have been playing fast and loose, something chronic. I wish we didn't, but we do. So that's just the way it is. And that's why I'd like to pay respect to those that went before us and did a better job of looking after the planet than we are currently doing. Speaking of which, the weather in Australia is getting exceedingly strange. Right now it is 30 degrees. It's autumn. Summer is done. It's autumn. We're a month and a half away from winter, pretty much. And it's 30 degrees. I went to Melbourne for a couple just this week. And I packed the jumper and I packed the jacket, as you would, because Melbourne gets quite nippy this time of year, except it didn't. It was hot right into the night. It was hot. That's unusual. It's in fact so unusual that most people were caught out by that and brought way too much luggage. We went for the Harry Potter show, which is only showing in London, New York, and Melbourne. If you are curious, it's interesting. It's a good show. Watch it if you want. If you like the Harry Potter series, it's very enjoyable. But yeah, Dave, the weather is. Oh, tell me how hot it is up in your neck of the woods, my friend. It's hot, right?
Yeah, it was the 30 degrees day, and it's also I think going to be 30 tomorrow. 26 degrees is the long-term average for the last 200 years for summer. That's the summer long-term average temperature, which is, January, February is the hottest period, and we're still exceeding summer temperatures. It's like, if there was a great meme, there was a great meme on Facebook, and that was a picture of like a temperature bar, like installing software in a progress bar, and it said installing autumn, and then it says failed, 404 not found. It's very funny. This is sort of what we feel like. Now, remember, Mickey and I have always spoken about the elongation of summer and the ever-shrinking winter, where it just dips down for a little while and back up again into this temperature. Now, if we get to a point where winter doesn't exist any longer, because it's getting that way, then you've got to start thinking about how crops react to this, because the daylight hours, the amount of time of daylight, is the only thing that they've got to work on. It won't be the temperature anymore. Think about a deciduous tree, right? It throws the leaves off to protect its roots from freezing, because that is an insulation layer, and the snow piles up. Well, we don't have snow. So what happens after the winter period? It starts to put blooms out, right? And all the insects go, hey, I know it's time to start eating. Well, the problem is the flora can't cope. Actually, the fauna. The flora is okay. The fauna isn't able to cope with there not being triggering signals. And, you know, wildlife there won't be a spring if that was deleted. If winter was deleted, it just goes, it's not incredibly hot anymore, like it's not insanely hot, it's just going to be hot. And then it's going to go back to insanely hot again, and this dip will last for 8 months. The dip where we're at least not experiencing insanely hot temperatures. You know, 125 Fahrenheit or something like that in the summer period. I can't... when I started plotting this a long time ago, I figured, you know, winter really wouldn't change that much, but we'd see that, you know, the hourglassing of winter down a little, but I didn't think the extreme temperatures would affect it. Now, we haven't had the zeros for a while. You know, back to you.
Interestingly, interesting, Dave. This is it's a valid observation, the elongation of winter. I like to spend time in the equatorial region. In the equatorial region, you know, places like Ecuador. I want to give that away. Ecuador, Singapore, right?
Places they ran out of names. They ran out of names.
Pretty much, right?
They had 8 seconds to think of the time.
Hey, boy! Girl, come over here. Dog, come on, dog.
Dog.
It makes life simpler,
Ecuador,
right?
Yeah, that's it.
A lot simpler. But the point is that any nation around the equatorial region, you know, within a few degrees, experiences pretty much the same temperature all year round, because there's no variation in distance from the sun per se. Because the only reason we have seasons is because of the axial tilt of the Earth.
That's right.
At 20, I think it's 23.5 degrees. But the point is, it is getting that way here in Australia. Oddly enough, we have temperatures that keep, you know, steadily warm. Our winters are getting warmer. Our summers are getting a lot hotter, right? So the plant life, certainly, as Dave has pointed out, is adjusting or trying to adjust. Some of the native flora and fauna might be okay, because Australian native plants, they're used to extreme temperature, you know, changes, fires and floods and all that. So that's how they propagate, in fact. But anything that was brought here from Europe or elsewhere might have a hard time getting there. And I mean, recently we had things that were wiped out. We had a banana crop wiped out. Other things were wiped out as well before that. And after, so fruit bats, yeah. Look,
fruit bats fell from the trees dead because they overheated. Right, and they during the day, they don't have caves, right? During the day, they hang out in trees. I mean, hang out, literally, mind the pun. They hang upside down in trees, and their wings are, rather than a shield of steel, they're a heat sink. And they're able to get rid of their body heat through their wings. Yeah. But they were incapable of doing it in this last summer, and we lost, I think it was more than 75% of the fruit bats in Australia. Through the heat waves that we've all experienced.
That's a lot, to be honest.
But thinking about it in the past, we hadn't lost that kind of quantity of them because the nighttime and the daytime temperatures were insufficient for them to pass away, right? And it's only this summer where we've seen such extremes in temperature that we've lost them. So I don't care who you are, what planet you live on. If you want to know if the planet is getting hotter, come to Australia and then argue with me that it's going into an ice age, right? Good luck. Because that's what happens, Becky, doesn't it? So an ice age comes, an ice age comes because it gets hotter, and then it gets so hot it suddenly freezes. Is that right? Is that how it works? Because I don't see it.
So to be clear, we have seen some extreme cold snaps. So that was for the very reason that the Arctic was heating up and let cold, sub-zero air almost escape down the Arctic Circle into North America. So that's what happened.
Right.
And I think we explained this at length. So the heating can lead to freezing periods in the Northern Hemisphere, very much so. Yes, it can. It doesn't mean it's hailing in a new ice age, not necessarily, right? I mean, a whole bunch of stuff has to happen for an ice age to come. And can global warming cause it eventually? Yeah. Because once we start messing with the climatological topology, as it were, of the planet, all bets are off. Because we have no idea what's going to happen.
Because if the ocean conveyor ceases,
well, that's it.
Then you can see a freezing of the northern pole again.
Yeah, but the problem is we don't have. Again, we said this before. We don't have enough computing power to accurately run models. We don't know what's going to happen. And already over the last 20, I've been watching this for the last probably 30 years, but certainly for the last 15 to 20 years, every model that the weather scientists, the climatologists came up with, the meteorologists, they've all been wrong. Not because they're dumb and they don't know what they're doing, simply because the variables are too complex. There are too many things to consider. So that their models are actually pretty good for what we have. But they're not, because they don't capture enough data, right? There's not enough meaningful information that we can extract from those models. And a lot of things are just missed out on completely. The melting is a lot faster of both the Arctic as well as the tundra, the permafrost in the Northern Hemisphere. And the rising of the sea levels is a lot faster. The rising of the temperatures was predicted to take decades. They said, it'll take 100 years before we have to worry about it. It's taken years, not decades. It's taken years for the temperature to encroach upon that 2-degree permanent mean warming. That's a lot.
Mackie, if you have a look at the equatorial temperatures in Darwin, for instance, historically, they've already gone up 2 degrees. They used to peak out between 32 and 33 degrees Celsius, and now they're up to 35 degrees.
That's significant.
That is big.
It is, interestingly enough, American television, funnily enough, maybe other nations as well as picking up on it. I watched a show called Madam Secretary. I enjoyed it. Sort of light and the last episode that I watched, my wife and I watched together. That's fun. Anyway, the last episode, there was this island in the Pacific. It was called, I can't remember, it's called something or other, right? Anyway, it's a small little island. I don't know, 10,000 people living in it, but it was an independent nation. And what happened is that this being hit by these super storms that formed in the Pacific, these typhoons, and it so happened that this particular island was a coral island, so it didn't have a bedrock foundation, but it was rather sitting on coral, which is a bit more fragile. And predictions were made that the island would disappear in the next strong typhoon. So again, in this reality, the Americans tried to evacuate and resettle these people, and they did resettle them on an island, Fiji. The point though is that the island was destroyed in the next typhoon, killing a few hundred, but the majority of the 10,000 had actually evacuated into a new island in Fiji, which had been given to them as the new nation state. Now, this is a TV show, which is actually not bad, deals with interesting subject matter in general, and it talked about climate refugees. And what happened, it talked about the destruction of an island in the Pacific, which we are about to see soon enough, don't worry, and what would happen and how hard it would be to resettle these people. And this is really, really interesting. So this is no longer just something that is written or talked about by scientists or science fiction writers. This is now part of mainstream entertainment in a way, hopefully making people think. Because the show itself is a bit highbrow, so I do hope that people look at it and think about it. So climate refugees on a television show that airs in America, quite controversial, but we will see it, and we're seeing it already. People are leaving their countries. People say, they're leaving because the economy collapsed. In South America, we saw recently. Yeah, but why did it collapse? Because the weather systems collapsed. The weather systems changed. Crops failed. Okay, it had a knock-on effect on the economy. People could no longer eat. If you no longer can eat where you are, if you no longer have clean water. There was a hurricane, typhoon, some storm that hit Africa, killing hundreds.
Yes.
Worse. cholera has broken out. They're sending 50,000 or some crazy number of vaccines into Africa.
Well, it's 50 million displaced. 50 million people displaced by it.
You know, think about that for a second. Okay, where are they going to go? Where are they going to go? They can't go south. There's not much there, so they go north. But they can't go north in Africa because the north of Africa, that's the Sahara Desert. So they're going to come into Europe, right? Maybe into the Levant, maybe not. But there's a massive population shift happening. It happened in the past. It's not like it has never happened. It's like, oh, it never happened before, Mackie. No, it has. There's a huge period when I learned history in Germany. It was called Völkerwanderung, which meant people's movements. And this particular age, which was about 2,000 or 3,000 years ago, was massively colored by the fact that huge migrations of peoples happened. Massive, here, there, everywhere, all over. I mean, another migration happened more recently when the Huns attacked Europe, coming in from Asia, Central Asia, into northern Europe, pushing people before them and out under. So the Hungarians, in fact, the entire Slavic race, I guess, has the Huns to thank for their existence, right? The Finns, the Magyars, the Hungarians, the Turks, any Turkish people, they all were pushed from Central Asia into the European direction. And as Dave and I have stipulated last time, they might as well, or they probably were also pushed south into what we like to refer as Southeast Asia, and of course, eventually Australia. Okay, so everything is connected. We can't just be Eurocentric here. That's foolish. But I do want to spend a couple of moments on current affairs before we talk about something else. So two things.
All I'm going to say is I'm just going to be very, very careful. So I'm just going to preface this with Max Egan's channel has been disabled because he mentioned a very small country next to Australia and just questioned the narrative. That's all he did. He didn't do anything else. And he's been turned off. And the other topic that you can't talk about is the G after 4G. I'm not going to say it. I don't want YouTube to. No, I'm just saying
we're not going to talk about it. No. That's all good. So there's a whole different kind of thing happening with those two topics. But be that as it may, I actually wanted to talk about both the Golan Heights and Brexit.
Oh, cool.
So the Golan Heights. So what are the Golan Heights? The Golan Heights are exactly that. I know, right? No, don't worry about it. It's all good. The Golan Heights are a little hilly mountain range between Syria and Israel, more or less. Right? In essence, which was the Golan Heights were seized by Israel some time ago, I think in 1967, and have been, I guess, Israeli ever since, but not officially. So, no other nation recognizes Israel's sovereignty over that piece of land. Now, why is it important? Well, it's important because you look down into Syria and, more importantly, into Damascus from the Golan Heights. You can actually see Damascus when you're looking down. So it's strategically a very important kind of advantage point. And now Mr. Trump, or President Trump, has gone ahead and says it actually belongs to Israel. Thank you very much. That after saying that Jerusalem should be the capital of Israel. So what is being telegraphed here, in no uncertain terms, America is 100% on the side of the Israelis, without any willingness to negotiate anything else. There's no willingness here on any side to negotiate anything. So now Golan Heights are now Israeli possessions. Yeah, Jerusalem is the Israeli capital city. Good luck to you. That has far-reaching ramifications. I mean, it's always those two have actually been, and Gaza as well, but certainly Jerusalem has always been a sticking point. The West Bank to a lesser extent, Gaza, maybe, but the Golan Heights, Syria, of supreme importance. So it's telegraphing unequivocal support for the Israelis from the United States. That's fact number one. What does it mean for the region? Well, Israel will be emboldened. And now, in fact, Benjamin Netanyahu is now vowing to annex the settlements. What are the settlements? So the settlements are Jewish settlements or Jewish homesteads in Palestinian territory. So this is officially Palestinian territory, but off we go. And we're claiming those back. Hebron, other holy cities that the Israelis claim, or well, I should say the Jewish people, not the Israelis, claim for themselves, and they've just built settlements. They're not legally, they're not allowed to do it by international law, even by Israeli law, but they do it anyway. So off they went and do it because they believe it's their land, and God gave it to them. So I'll go and settle. Heavily armed, heavily fortified little settlements they are, but they're illegal in Israeli law as well. Now what Israel says, Mr. Netanyahu, I'm going to annex those. I'm going to take them over and make them legally mine, flaunting completely any international agreements such as they are, and inviting more conflict, in my opinion. The Middle East history is a very complex beast. I happened to actually study it. So it was my major at uni. Mm-hmm. I studied political sciences, and the Middle East was my main topic. Other things as well, but Middle East especially. It's a very, very complex animal. Mm. And oddly enough, the people that settle in those areas, like Hebron and so forth, are people that would never vote with Likud or any other secular Israeli party, because the ultra-Orthodox that live in Israel, or anywhere in the world for that matter, believe that the state of Israel itself is an affront to God, because the Messiah did not lead the Jewish people to Israel, but rather the Jewish people took it upon themselves to move into what is now called Israel and make it their own. So the ultra-Orthodox Jews have a massive issue with it. And funnily enough, in the Knesset, which is the Jewish parliament, you will find the ultra-Orthodox Jews routinely voting together with the Arabs. Now the Arabs, well, the fanatical Arabs, the fanatical Muslim Arabs also believe that the Israelis or the Jews shouldn't be in a country called Israel, because for the same reasons God did not give it to them. They, for themselves. So it's very interesting. But then when the ultra-Orthodox Jews were there, they thought, you know what? We are here anyway now, so we might as well get our holy cities back, such as Hebron and so forth. So none of this is easy. None of this is easy. None of this is, oh, yeah, we'll support this guy and everything is fine. No, Israel within itself is divided. I don't know if you guys ever watched The Life of Brian. If you haven't, please. If there's no other Monty Python movie you watch in your life, watch The Life of. They're taking a bit of a land. They're making a bit of fun of the Palestinian Liberation Front, the Palestinian
PLA,
Front for PLA, and then others. There's like 4 or 5. Maybe there's dozens of different orders there, right? And the Liberation Front for Palestine. They all suicide missions. But it's super splintered, right? It's very splintered. The movie makes fun of it, but it's the truth. It actually is a reflection on the actuality of the situation, and not just on the Israeli side. On everybody's side, everybody is splintered and fragmented, because the Middle East is fundamentally a tribal region. It's tribal. It's not nation states that rule. It's tribal leaders, warlords, if you will. Yeah. After World War I, the British and the French did the worst thing they could have done. Yeah? They divided the Middle East according to what they thought would be in their interest. Within a few decades, both the French and the British, I should say, were booted out of the Middle East, or made a quick escape out of the Middle East, right? Because they had royally screwed it up and they couldn't hold it anymore. And anyway, so this is all history. But it's not simple. My point is, it's not a simple area of the world. Not many areas are simple, but this one is specifically complex. And you can't just throw your weight behind a single nation state there. I mean, you can, but Dave, I am worried that this might be a signal, a telegraph, hello, for renewed and more decisive conflict in the Middle East that we can look forward to in the near future.
I'm happy that you passed that to me. The thing that I'm truly worried about, but I'll run with your current line, is increased tensions, sure, and I agree. Tensions perceived by the West using the Western media doesn't show an equal amount of information from both sides, unfortunately, and I feel sorry for the people, for the PLA, the PLF. I have a hard time seeing their town absolutely decimated. My personal opinion is I think that the conflict should just cease. And regardless if it's a to and fro, it's a tit for tat, it's a you bomb me, I bomb you, I still have a hard time with our polarized media, because it's really only showing one side of the picture. Having said that, yes, it's possible that could escalate really quickly out of control. That was probably why there was some abstinence in the voting and eventual Australian recognition of moving the... What do they move, Mackie? Not the head, the title city?
Capital city.
Capital city, that's right. But Australia recognised that in the end, I believe. But there was a lot of people who abstained. And
yeah, the embassies are being moved from Tel Aviv, which is the actual official capital.
That's right.
The Americans moved
Israel.
the embassy to Jerusalem.
That's right.
But Australia has not followed suit. They've gone as far as recognizing, or sort of recognizing Jerusalem. But America is the only nation that so far has moved the embassy. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Thank you. And look, if you want to keep poking the enemy with actions that can only lead in an aggressive, as it can be maybe attributed to an aggressive action by the enemy, if you're just going to keep pissing them off, sorry to say that, then you're going to end up with an outcome, and the outcome may not be favorable for those people, plus all of the team players that play on each side. And I really have a hard time with that. Look, right now, our leaders, in my opinion, are letting us all down. There is a grand polarization across the planet, and these are leaders right now that are ones that could have... Oh, look, call me silly, naive possibly, and I'll take it because I agree with you. But, we could have certainly arrived at world peace a long time ago, but I think religion and religious ideals get in the way. There is the political base in which our countries run themselves, so that also gets in the way. We have historical issues where people remember the past far too closely than it occurred, which is also another really strong polarizer. And it basically, you've just, divided the sea, and on one side is the West, on the other side, or parts of the West, and on the other side is everybody else. Now, so far, since in the last, 10 years, I've only seen a widening of that gap. There is not, it's almost completely separated a Venn diagram into two separate circles. I mean, what the hell? Is this... If we look at our political leaders, we should be seeing people who are attempting to make, both ends meet. We're expecting them to come to and this is the segue for your next point, come to a conclusion. They're meant to have come up with the way towards peace, not continued anger and provocation. So we're seeing this in Meckie's Brexit conversation, which I'll pass to him in 5 seconds, and that is, it's unbelievable, Meckie.
Excuse me, just took a drink of water there. But yes, the Brexit.
I said 5 seconds. Right?
You did.
It's completely. It's even beyond. It's beyond the political reporters, which I saw a very nicely old man. He was very nicely, probably 70-year-old political journalist, interviewing one of the their members of parliament about Brexit, and 70 years, right? I swear he's got to be 70 or 75. And he did, Meki, in my eyes, he did what that dog did the day before its retirement in the teddy bear factory, where it was the night watchman's patrol dog, or just couldn't take it anymore, and he tore apart all the bears, right? Could not take it anymore. And in this poor interviewer's frustrations in 75 years of just basically, and I really hate to use these words, basically, in his eyes, Parliament has turned into a bunch of gen techs who can't make a decision.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And he let that out.
That's it though.
He flew at them.
Yeah.
At this poor fellow who decided we can't really decide.
Yeah. The problem is that we have a generation of people that we allowed to, I guess, come into power now, that grew up in complete peace in the West. I'm talking about only the West, specifically Great Britain, Europe, and all that, right? The European Union has been living for the past almost, let's call it 60, 70 years, in an artificial state of peace, which is great. It's a great thing, don't get me wrong. But people get fed up with it, it's like, why were there cannibals in the South Pacific? It doesn't make any sense. Why did these people have wars? It doesn't make any sense. The South Pacific is probably the best place to live on the planet. I mean, if you've got shelter and you grow up, you can weather the storms. But other than that, there's fruit, there's plenty of fishing, there's hunting too. So you don't really have to work hard for a living, and maybe that's the problem. So what do? You make yourself some entertainment. You raid the neighboring tribes. You start eating people because you're bored. It's what you do. You eat people, and this is what we're seeing here. People are bored. There's no real conflict, imaginary conflict. People coming, they don't talk about language. They've got funny beards, and they got funny clothes, and they talk funny languages, and they're stealing my jobs. And I can focus on that. And I feel better about myself. It's great. And then I go to see a soccer match, and I feel even better.
And then I watch something on.
And this is what we're seeing here. Oh, if you have one, right? Lucky bastard.
You are crucified.
The thing is that. Yeah. I'll be cut down an hour. But the thing is that we don't appreciate what we have. We just don't, right? And it's easier to then complain and bellyache it to the point where it just takes a few demagogues to rile up the masses and to start voting for Brexit, like British exit out of the European Union, which happened. It happened. It's a thing. Oh, I never thought we'd actually leave. Oh no. And nobody actually thought about what that really, really means. The Irish border, the people that live in Europe and work in Europe, all the companies, the banks, everything that Europe has done over the last 60 years. 60! You can't just undo that overnight. And now she's asking for more extensions. And the Europeans go, well, there'll be a time when they say, no, that's it. You're out. No deal. Which would screw them, Dave.
Hang on. So the people voted, right? To exit.
The people voted.
The people voted. And they were given a reasonable level of confidence, but they broke that confidence by actually voting to exit the EU. The people putting it together were convinced that it wouldn't fly, and so it'll be harmless. Don't worry about it. We'll put it out there. Holy hell! We've counted the votes, sir, and it's overwhelming. They want to leave, but we don't want to leave. Yeah, well, we'll drag it out as far as we can, right? And then what we're going to do is we're going to get the people to vote again because it's just all too hard, and then we're going to get them to vote, and they'll turn it around. They'll go, we don't want to leave anymore because it's too hard. What do you mean? Has there ever been a time in history, Meki, where people have voted for a referendum, the government has appeared to look like they've tried, and then given the people another chance to decline?
To change the mind, though.
Yeah.
That actually hasn't happened. It actually has. Not in any country that I know of. Hey, look, you all voted, and we all didn't like it because, it was just a protest vote. We get that now. You're only little... See, but this is my point. We're all children, Dave. We are all children. That's what children do. I didn't get my way. I'm going to take my toys. I'm going to go.
It's my ball. I'm going home. I'm going home.
Yeah, boom. Right there. I'm going home. That's it. Done. And you do. And this is what happened here. I've thrown my toys out. I don't like it. I don't want immigration anymore. I don't want this. I don't want that. The Europeans telling me what to do. Blah, blah, blah. But you've been living in relative prosperity, peace. You can do whatever you want. You can go to the pub and complain about the immigrants. Good for you. Mm-hmm. Right? So it is really something to behold, to watch it. And we are all, and again, this is perfect for today's show. We are children. We are artificially, I guess, constrained. Our lifespan has been artificially cut short. We never fully develop into actual grown-ups, into adult human beings. None of us. If you live to 150, you're still a child. You're still a child. Yes, you age and you look old and necky. People give me this. Oh, but we all look older and we're aging. Yes, you are physically. Mentally you haven't really matured. 100%. Yeah. It takes time, I think. It takes time. Now, imagine you can turn off this aging thing. Yeah, I mean, okay, if you've got an accident or someone shoots you in the head, you die. That's fair enough. But if you didn't die of old age, if you didn't age, if your body didn't fail you, if you got rid of cancer and all that stuff, and lived, we could live long, productive lives. And I do believe that eventually we would reach a certain stage of maturity. And in fact, maybe several stages of maturity. Just like you're an infant, you're a toddler, you're a preschooler,
adolescent,
you're a teenager, adolescent, then you're what's called an adult. I would call it pre-adult, but that's me, young adult. And then on it goes, right? These are the life stages. Because our life is very short, we only have a few life stages. Okay? So it is my contention that we're seeing everything we're seeing in the world, things are, to some extent at least, is because we are children. And again, it's genius. If you think about it, the entire system was set up for us to be here. So we are in this reality. We're kept here. We never get smart enough to, as a group of us, to get out of here. We're not given enough time to discover it all. You have to be extremely lucky and extremely focused in order to make your way out of here. So you have to be born into a community of people that understand the truth, which is very rare. Then you have to have the, the aptitude to then follow the path, which is a hard path to actually get out of here. Okay, so all of these things have come together. I mean, it happened a few times in history. Jesus, the Buddha, and so forth. Those guys all a few women as well, of course. So, but it has happened. It's not like it hasn't happened. It's still happening as well today. But it's such a rare thing because we simply don't have enough time. In fact, our time is, even though we live longer than we did in previous centuries, we still don't live long enough. And most of the time that we do spend living in inverted commas, as he says, as he makes that sign with his two hands next to his face, living, we spend in the Western world, and I'm talking about only, and I'll talk about the others in a second, we spend out watching the Kardashians. I know I hate on them a lot, but they're just such poster children. And we spend our time watching things like Married at First Sight. And I don't understand, Dave, how that's possible. It's insanity. But so that's us in the Western world. So we have a lot of time on our hands, so that's what we do. We waste our time. In the other parts of the world, people worry about clean drinking water, about food, about shelter. The real, they have problems. Yeah, 100%. So they have problems. We don't have problems. So we waste our time, which we could much better spend doing something useful or beneficial to ourselves and others, but we choose not to. Okay. So where does it leave us? It leaves us in exactly the kind of mess that you would expect children to get into if they're unsupervised. Look at the state of the planet. I'm not saying every human being is like that. There are very old souls here. There are very mature people here. Some people remember their past lives, but even if they don't, they remember the level of maturity they were able to attain. Certainly the elite remembers everything either but because they've never actually died, or because they found a way in which to cheat reincarnation and keep all of their memories. I don't know which one it is. I think the former, and probably a little bit of the second as well. But certainly they have a much better understanding of what this entire panopticon looks like than any of us. So we are starting to puzzling it out. We're starting to puzzle it out where we are. In fact, all the researchers we've spoken to, and we were lucky to talk to a few great ones, told us that we're on the right track. They told us, yeah, there's something that's going on. You guys are on the right track with what you're doing. Mm-hmm. So I take a lot from that encouragement. But if you really look at the state of the world, I mean, I don't know if you have read the book or seen the movie Lord of the Flies out there in Listenerland. If you haven't, do have a look. And read the book or watch the movie, whichever you prefer. It shows you what happens when you have a society run by children. And then I ask you, once you've finished reading or watching the movie, whichever,
here it goes.
Look at the world. Look at what happened in Lord of the Flies. Then look at what happens in the world. Okay, that's all I'm asking. That's it. But I think I've ranted enough, my friend. What are your thoughts on this?
That's what I'm saying. I'm saying I held a lot more faith in the leaders in the world to have come already to a conclusion of which we all benefit. Not individually benefit, screwing the other people to the ground, but where our planet benefits from these decisions. That's the disappointing part.
That's a nice thought.
Any leader currently in a job of leadership where they could make these decisions could be the next star, the shining star who goes down in history of doing the right thing. And yet, we're just about to enter into a political phase of Australia's historical records, and it's not looking great. They're just doing the same thing. What they're doing is, I'm turning into Carl Sagan, I swear. What they're doing is, they gift right before the election, and then they get voted in, and they do whatever they want, and then right before the next election, they gift again. Yes. We're in a gift phase, where everyone's got their hand out going, oh, I hope it's me. There was a TV show when I grew up called Romper Room, right? And if they called your name out, looking through the magic mirror, oh, it's Mark, Stephen, Jeff, Graham, and if they didn't say my name, I was disappointed. But when they did, David, yes, she can see me, it's magical. That is the kind of thing that the government is doing right now with their gift giving. And it's very difficult to say that someone's awful if they've given something to you. So I'm feeling as though this is the period in which we're just going to see the same old, same old. I'm not sure that, that independents are going to come up and surprise them like Donald Trump did in the US. I don't think any of our political leaders have the energy within them, the good energy to be able to make those changes either. So we'll have to wait for the next round. What happened to the UN? Imagine if the UN wasn't toothless. Imagine if the UN was that power to itself, right? I don't know. I'm not going to get too political on it. Look, all I'm saying is it could have been much better. Could you imagine the life? Remember, fear porn, right? Fear porn is what it's all about. This war on terror. Let's just continue it. Let's make everyone afraid. And Mickey, we've seen the censorship of websites in Australia. Yes. Unless you have a VPN, you can pop up in some other country, you can still get to them. But that's going too, because the Australian government has requested the ability to enter into those, secure streams to be able to still see the data flow through those streams. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so at some point, with all of this, the only thing that's still left is reprogramming.
Yeah.
And that's it. Because there's everything else has been achieved. Right now, we've got censorship. They're censoring free speech. Can't do that anymore. We can't talk about those two topics I mentioned at the top of the hour, which I've mentioned one in the chat room. we can't talk about those now because the corporations that are providing the medium in which we're having this discussion will turn you off.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. No more of that. You can't talk about that anymore. What? When was that a thing? But we asked for it, making the people of the world. You see, they said, "Oh, that's a bad thing. We don't want to hear the wrong kind of messages. So we'll just turn them all off." What? Right. So not even 2 weeks ago we could talk about it, but now we can't. It was the fastest legislation to go through any parliament from, and I think it was 300 pages that was approved within a week. And if you ever worked with government, you'll know that that's almost an impossibility to create a 300-page document in a week. Yeah, then have it approved in Parliament. That's something's wrong with that. Anyway, so look, Mickey, do you agree that they could shine, that the political leaders could shine if they did the right thing?
Look, I don't think there's any doubt about that. In fact, some do, and they're quickly either killed, and then that's happened. So I'm not just a conspiracy theory that actually happens, right?
Yeah.
In fact, look at the politicians that have died over time, right? And look what they've done and what they were about to do. Then you will see what I'm talking about. Or they come in full of beans, and they want to do this and want to do that, but they're quickly disillusioned with the machine, and they go, well, you know what? There's very little I can do here, so I'll just do whatever I can and run with the crowd. That happens. Or you come in corrupt already, which is perfect, because then you don't have to worry about anything. You're already where you're meant to be. You're already good. I'm just voting with the party. Thank you very much. No, it's time to vote. Yeah, sure, it's time to vote. What are we voting on today, and how should I vote? This is what you do. That's what happens with your elected representatives across the world. Not just in Australia or America, everywhere. Especially when you have party divisions. Everybody votes along party lines, right? It's meaningless at that point. It's meaningless because the party has decided this is what we're going to do, and off we go. I don't believe in anything else, and here we are.
That's right.
Very few people have the stomach for shining, for being the light in the darkness, and the ones that do, like I said, they're the ones that are no longer with us and aren't with us for long in the first place, because the machine. I had this conversation with the father of a friend of mine years ago, 30 years maybe, no, maybe longer, no, about 30 years, and we're talking about what happened in Tasmania back in the day. So, actually, about 20 years ago, 23.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's all I'm saying. And he gave me the report that was done by a retired Army major, and I read it, and I already spoken about that. But he said to me, and I had written a letter to Nexus magazine, that's why he started talking to me. He also read Nexus, and he had read my letter, and he was quite surprised. He said, "Did you write this?" I said, "Yes, I did." And we started talking, and he goes, you can't fight against the machine. It's going to crush you. It's going to chew you up and spit you out, right? Listen, and I, naively in my 20s, full of beans. Oh, no, I can fight the machine. Da, da, da.
Good luck with that.
And good luck with that, as Dave has just said. You can't actually fight the machine. What you can do is raise awareness. You can educate yourself, and you can make other people think. Because the machine is us. We are the machine. All of us are the machine. There might be few others involved there at the top levels, sure enough. You're not controlling it all, but ultimately, the machine is us. We run the panopticon. We run the black prison planet, as some people call it, the cage. I don't care what you want to call it, but we run it. And by the way, it's not a black prison planet, it's a black prison universe. Just to make that point, it's a lot bigger than we can imagine. A lot bigger. And then if quantum physics hasn't shown anything but that, then you need to read through it again and fully understand what it tells you. What it tells you is there are many, 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 in fact, an infinite number of other realities out there apart from this one. But this one is special in that we are required for its existence. But that's going too far. But yeah, Dave, look, it's a funny old world, right? And again, we could talk about this for hours on end, making all kinds of references to this and that, and drawing and drawing, parallels and making connections. That's important, making connections, because it's all connected. You can't look at any of this in isolation. Impossible. You must encompass everything, or at least as much as you can, to understand everything. Because you start talking to people, and they're focused on this and they're focused on that. Even if they've got an open mind, it's really hard to tell someone something new. I tell you what it was for me, Dave, just very quickly.
Music.
Okay, I won't tell you. Don't go anywhere. Donate if you can, please, and click through to the sponsors link on the webpage if you can.
Okay, well, apparently the break is over now. Thanks for that in the chat room. Did you know
Beautiful.
that you are back with David Mackey's Shiny Side Out on freedomslips.com on the #1 listener-funded, listener-supported talk radio on the entire net. So push the donate button or subscribe to the archives for only $5.95 Australian per month. I'd like to say hello to everyone who's just catching up with us for the first time. If this is the first time you've heard our show, then there's a whole back catalogue that I suggest you go through. If you've got the ability to do it, throw a monthly of $5.95 Australian. Okay, well, apparently the break is over now. Archives. Thanks for that. I'm just going to pause that. There we go. That's better. All right. That way that you not only get our archives, but you get all of the station's archives, and you're gifting something to the station, which is fantastic. If you don't want to do that, though, you could just buy some gifts for yourself. Donate some money, get something back in return. Follow the instructions on the website, and that's www.revolution.radio. It's pretty cool. This is show number 369.
960 and 300.
You know, in my show notes, it actually says pause for Mackie. I love that. I did it when you weren't here the other day, last week. I did it myself, and it just felt weird. But it's fun. Let's just put it that way. It's fun.
What?
It's all good. Yeah. All right. So, Mackie, would you like to finish your thought from the other side of the break? And I can't remember what it was. I can't remember what my thought
Hey, it was important. It'll come back to me at some point. I'm sorry. I apologize. Clearly now, look, I tried to get into the chat. I have been reading the chat, but I haven't been able to contribute, and now it's just taking too long to refresh. But Dave, if anybody in the chat remembers what their thought is, I will try to finish.
Yeah, sure. I'll let you know.
Having said that, we're talking about Giants, and last time, which was 2 weeks ago, we finished our look at Basque and Bulgarian mythology, and today we're going to talk about Greek mythology. In fact, the word giant comes to us from the Greek, I should say. Comes to us from the Greek. Greek giants. The word giant comes from the Greek after Gaia, the earth, the goddess of the earth, if you will, but certainly a representation of the earth in ancient Greece, became angry with Zeus, the father of the Olympian gods. The giants and the Olympians engaged in a war to the death known as the Gigantomachy. In Greek mythology, the Gigantes, or Gigantes, meaning earthborn, Dave, that means earth. But giants means... Let me just pause on this just for a second, because this is really super important. I'll tell you why it's super important, right? Because we have been stipulating for the past 9 years, 8 years, whatever it is, however many years it is.
It's years. How many years?
Stipulating years, many years. But this is really critical. In fact, these show notes, you haven't seen it, but once they upload it, we really have to get.
We have plenty of them, by the way.
The picture, I know, right? The picture that starts these show notes is a picture of the Sumerian god Marduk, or in fact, it might be Enlil, one of the Sumerian gods being waited on by human beings. The god is, I guess, a similar size comparison to a toddler, to the goddess, the adult size, and the grown humans are toddler size in that particular comparison. And hence my epiphany that maybe we are children. But the point here is earthborn. In the Bible, the sons of God came down to the earth and had intercourse with the women of the earth and had children. And those children were giants, heroes of old were called. They were giants, heroes of old. So we have from various sources, coming at us, and this is just a very important one because giants means earthborn, that these are earthborn or earth native, at least half, people that were of gigantic stature in the ancient and dim prehistory. Yeah? And it is really, really, really important to understand this. We talked about the Igigi.
Because you
talked about the Anunnaki.
How on earth could that be possible, Maggie?
But that's exactly right. And the Bible is but, and I'm not going to get hate for this, but it's a poor rendering of the ancient Sumerian mythologies.
Correct.
It really is. I'm talking about the Old Testament here, specifically Genesis, but mostly others too, but mostly Genesis and the Old Testament. That's a retelling of Sumerian mythology, or not so much mythology, but maybe real facts. Once you go to the original cuneiform tablets, the Gilgamesh epic, and there were others as well, which we looked at in detail. We went to the original translations from the universities and we shared those with you at verbatim. Mm-hmm. Right? And it's important to understand it. So the Igigi, one of the Igigi was taken and dismembered, if you will, I guess, to some extent, and out of him the Adamu were made in what we would now call birthing chambers or artificial wombs or whatever you want to call it, right? In the poem, it's right there in the Enuma Elish. You read it, and they were of gigantic stature, but the Adamu were actually killed in the flood. And well, what came after the Adamu? So we are not the children of Adam. We are not those. That's not what we are. But my point is, gigantes, again from the Greek. This is coming from the Greek, earthborn. Okay. Now, according to the poet Hesiod, they were the children of Uranus and Gaia, spirits of the sky and the earth. So don't forget that Uranus was, in fact, the father of Jupiter. Okay, and he predated the gods. So he was there before the gods. So was Gaia. Gaia was there before the Olympian gods, Zeus and all those, funny guys. They predate them. They were their ancestors, but they got into a war. Now, according to the Greek mythology, these gigantes, or the Greek giants, were a race of huge creatures who were the offspring of Gaia, as I said, the earth, and Uranus, the heavens. These giants were half man, half monster, with serpents' tails instead of legs in depictions. Again, it might have a half amphibian ancestry in there as well. Maybe this is where our mermaid legends come from. But the point is that it's earth and heaven. So if you have a race coming down, the Anunnaki, for argument's sake, to earth, and they, mate with the natives, then you have a race which is half heaven-born and half earth-born, wouldn't you? I might be simplifying it, but stay with me on that. They were involved in a conflict with the Olympian gods called the Gigantomachy, when Gaia had them attack Mount Olympus. This battle was eventually settled when the hero Heracles, the son of Zeus, by the way, and a human woman, decided to help the Olympians. The Greeks believed some of them, like Enceladus, to lay buried from that time under the earth, and that their tormented quivers resulted in earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. Herodotus in Book 1, Chapter 68, describes how the Spartans uncovered in Tegea the body of Orestes, which was 7 cubits long. That's around 10 feet or 3 meters. So Herodotus was probably the first historian, that we would call a historian in ancient times. He was the first to write historical rather than mythological texts. In his book, The Comparison of Romulus with Theseus, Plutarch, another writer, describes how the Athenians uncovered the body of Theseus, which was of more than ordinary size. The kneecaps of Ajax, another hero, were exactly the size of a discus for the boy's pentathlon, wrote Pausanias, another writer. A boy's discus was about 12 centimeters in diameter, while a normal adult patella, which is the kneecap, is around 5 centimeters, suggesting Ajax may have been around 14 feet or 4.3 meters tall. Right? The Cyclopes, or Cyclopes, usually children of gods, Olympians, and nature spirits like the Nereids, Naiads, and Dryads, we spoke about those, are also compared to giants due to their huge size. Polyphemus, son of Poseidon and Theusa, and nemesis of Odysseus, comes to mind, for example. The elder Cyclopes were the children of Gaia and Uranus, where they later made Zeus's master thunderbolt, Poseidon's trident, and Hades' helm of darkness during the Titanomachy. So they made those, right, the elder Cyclopes, while they were fighting the Titans, not the giants, the Titans. Titanomachy, okay, it's a different thing. The Hecatoncheires are giants that have 100 arms and 50 heads, who were also the children of Gaia and Uranus. And that brings to mind, Dave, some of the Hindu gods in their depictions. You know, they've got many arms, heads, right? Again, it's a cultural tier. Other known giant races in Greek mythology include the six-armed Gegenes, the northern Hyperboreans. So we spoke about Hyperborea as another seed for potential lost land, lost culture, and the cannibalistic Laestrygonians. Dave?
Yeah, that's just truly amazing, I have to say. It lines up with everything that we've discussed so far. Let's see what happens with the Hindu mythology. In Hinduism, the giants are called, now I'm going to guess, it's Daityas. That'll have to do. The Daityas were the children of Diti and the sage Kashyapa, who fought against the gods of Devas, because they were jealous of their Deva half-brothers. Since Daityas were a power-seeking race, they sometimes allied with other races having similar ideology, namely the Danavas or the Asuras. The Daityas, along with Danaus and Asuras, are sometimes called the Rakshasas. The genetic term for the demon in Hindu mythology is that Rakshasa. Some known Daityasa include Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyakasha. The main antagonist of the Hindu epic Ramayana or Ravana was Brahim from his father's side and Adaitya from his mother's side. His younger brother, Kumbhakarna, was said to be as tall as a mountain and was quite good-natured.
So, just on that, and I didn't actually put it in, I should have, my apologies there, but Diti is, in Hinduism, an earth goddess. What? What? So Gaia, the earth, or the earth goddess of the Greeks, and Diti, the Hindu earth goddess, or one of the earth goddesses, were the mothers, respectively, of the giants.
Mickey, again, doesn't that sound like Igigi, Diti?
What can I say? All I can see here is so many parallels. So you can put it down to it's just cultural bleed. I don't think so. I think this is referring to a common event back in the long distant past. Mm-hmm. Okay, and Kashyapa, the father, was one of the 7 ancient sages, okay? And he's the most ancient rishi listed in the colophon verse in the Upanishad. So he's quite a senior personage, comparable, I guess, if you let, I know this is taking a little bit of a stretch, but if you look at the cultural equivalents, you could say, well, he was like Zeus in many ways.
Wow.
Powerful, wise. Just saying, right?
Well, Nicky, we are talking about pre-flood history here. So it gets a little blurry, but because of as close as it comes to the time of the flood, this information is as best as we've got. So right. when you talk about cultural bleed or cultural contamination between two different cultures, look, the names aren't the same. They're not at all the same. The histories are slightly different. It's all about the differences. And to be honest, it does line up. And I think they line up very similarly next to each other and describe the event that we weren't there for.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we can appreciate.
There's actually more fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%. No, there's more fascinating stuff which I won't talk about now, but definitely in another show we're going to talk a lot more about it. Kashmir is actually related, or is got its name from Kashyapa Rishi, which is like a shortening, Kashyapa Mir, or the lake of the sage Kashyapa. So it's all connected. I'm telling you, it's just crazy. Anyway. Jain mythology, Jain, J-I-N, Jain. According to Jains, there was a time when giants walked upon this earth. Jain cosmology divides worldly cycles of time into 2 parts or half cycles, which are called Avasarpani, age of descending purity, and ascending, Utsarpani. So descending purity is Avasarpani and ascending purity is Utsarpani. According to Jain texts, the height of Rishabha, the first Tirthankara of present half-cycle time, Avasarpani, was 500 Dhanusa, which is a longbow, so 500 longbows. In Avasarpani, as the cycle moves ahead, height of all humans and animals decrease. There's a table here, which I will share with you a little, which talks about the different ages they are referring to. There's the Sukama, which has the utmost happiness and no sorrow. And that age lasted for a very, very long time. And the average height of people was 6 miles. Then there's the Sukama. And there's moderate happiness, but no sorrow. And that also lasted for a very, very, very long time. We're talking about times so long, it's trillions. And people then were 4 miles tall. Right, and the lifespan was also much longer in those eras rather. And there's the Sukama Dukkama, which is the age of happiness with very, very little sorrow, and that lasted again for a very, very long time. And people were about 2 miles tall, and they also lived for a very, very, very long time. Then there's Dukkama Sukkama, which is happiness with little sorrow, not very little sorrow, but a little sorrow, which also lasted a very long time, and people were 1,500 meters tall, and they lived for 705 quintillion years. So you can imagine how long the others lived. And then there's the Dukkama, and this is our age. Sorrow with very little happiness. So it's sorrow with very little happiness, which is not a bad description of where we are, and that lasts 21,000 years. And the average height of people is about 6. And we live to about 130 years on average. Or maximum, actually it says here. Maximum 130. Then there's another age, the Dukkama, extreme sorrow and misery, which lasts another 21,000 years. And people are about 2 feet tall and live 16 to 20 years. Now, there's an aside here which I need to share with you very, very quickly to explain it as well. Time, Carlos Amaya, the changes in living being and non-living substances from one parallel to another parallel of a substance are measured in the units of time. However, time is not the cause of such changes. There are two views that exist in Jainism with regards to time. One, time is an imaginary thing. It has no real existence. Two, time has a real existence consisting of innumerable time atoms. And then there's a breakdown of how they measure time, which I believe is just astounding. I won't go into this now, but I'll suffice it to say that they're getting close to working with enormous numbers here. It is quite astounding. 70 billion years. One purva, for example, is 70 trillion 560 million years. That's one purva. Yeah, one yuga is 5 years, 1 year is 12 months, and then it goes innumerable. One Paleopama is innumerable years. One Sagaropama is 10 times 10 million times 10 million Paleopamas. And on it goes. Dave, the next bit I find fascinating. The Native American mythologies, Dave.
Yeah, absolutely. According to Paiute oral history, the Sai-Tika or Sai are a legendary tribe of red-haired cannibalistic giants, the remains of which were allegedly found in 1911 by the guano miners. That's an unfortunate role, isn't it? In Nevada's Lovelock Cave. Furthermore, the how did I pronounce that? Paiute creation story tells of beautiful giants who once lived between the Sierra Nevada and the Rocky Mountains. After giving birth to a disfigured child, the giants treated the child so poorly that the giant spirit responded by making the land hot and desolate and allowing enemies to conquer the giants. Only 2 giants survive, Paiute and his wife, both of whose skin became brown from eternal living in the hot desert. Adrienne Mayer writes about the Sai-Tika in a book, Legends of the First Americans. She suggests that the giant interpretation of the skeletons from Lovelock Cave and other dry caves in Nevada were started by entrepreneurs setting up tourist displays, and that the skeletons themselves were of normal size. However, about 100 miles north of Lovelock, there are plentiful fossils of mammoths and cave bears, and their large limb bones could easily be thought to be those of giants by untrained observers. She also discusses the reddish hair, pointing out that hair pigment is not stable after death, and that the various factors such as temperature, soil, etc. can turn ancient, very dark hair rusty, red or orange. Giants can represent powerful natural forces that frighten and threaten humans. In the mythology of the Native American Lakota people, Wazia is a northern giant who blows the winter wind. Blows. In some traditions, a giant appears as a symbol of chaos, threatening to disrupt the orderly natural world or social community. Most Native American giants are evil and dangerous. Some start fights among humans so that in the confusion they can steal the men's wives. Others steal children, sometimes to eat them. Many Native American giants have monstrous or inhuman features. Tall man. This is very similar to the Australian story. Tall man, a giant of the Seminole people, smells bad, while giants in Lakota stories look like oxen. The Shoshone Indians of the American West tell stories of Zayovitz, an ogre or hideous giant who stole 2 children from Dove. Eagle helped Dove recover her children when the angry Zeovitz chased Dove. The animals protected her. Crane made a bridge from his legs so she could cross a river. Weasel dug an escape tunnel for her, and Badger made a hole where Dove pardon me, and her children could hide. After tricking Zeovitz, entering the wrong hole, Badger sealed him in with a boulder. Wow.
That's right. I know, right? Interesting stuff. Now, look, I don't completely disagree with Adrian Mayo, of course, and you can certainly say that an untrained observer would probably mistake bear or other bones for something else. But these are people that lived much closer to nature than we did, and they hunted for a living, and death was a lot more immediate, and they knew what human skeleton looked like as opposed to other animals' bones. So, look, again,
but
you can argue this. Yeah, go ahead.
Mackie, the red-headed, elongated skulls of the plains in Peru.
Yeah, there's that, exactly.
Right? So that red-headed pigment, they're saying to us today that was the hair color of the person. They've also found, black-haired people. They've found, I think that the error here made in the claim by Adrienne is that the hair color loses pigment over time. I don't know how much time they're talking about, but in our examples of recent times, we've not been able to equate that the same loss.
Yes, correct. And look, you can argue against it, but I really, considering all the evidence, I'm making a very strong case for the existence of actual giants. And I know people go, "You crazy," and that's okay. That's okay. I'll be right. I'd rather be right and crazy than wrong and insane. Which brings us to the South American and then even further South American legends. I'll take the Quinametzin, but the Paragon, dude. The Patagonians, that's something else entirely. So in Aztec mythology, which is now the Quinametzin populated the world during the previous era of the Son of Rain, the Nahui Kuyahuitl, the Son of Rain. So each sun or each age, a sun in Aztec mythology refers to an age. And usually the age is described by the way it came to an end. And this is the age that came to an end via rain and flooding, the Son of Rain. We are living in a Son of Fire, just in case you're wondering. A Quinametzin stands more than 10 feet tall and weighs about 650 pounds. They were punished by the gods because they did not venerate them. And their peak civilization came to an end as a result of great calamities and as a punishment from the heavens for grave sins they had committed. The construction of the Pyramid of Cholula and the city of Teotihuacan, the place where men become gods, that's what it means, Teotihuacan, was attributed to the Quinametzin giants, similarly to the stories of the Tower of Babel, of course. These are the names of those giants. There's Cuauhtémoc, one of the 4 giants who support the sky at the beginning of the 5th sun. Itzcoatl, one of the 4 giants who supported the beginning of the 5th sun, as were Itzcatli and Tenexuey. Then there was Xelhua, the giant founder of Cuacocan, Itzocan, Epatlan, and Teopantlan, and other cities. This giant built the Great Pyramid of Cholula. Then there's Tenoch, the giant founder of Tenochtitlan. There's Ulmecatl, the giant founder of several other cities, as well as Mixtacatl, Sicalancatl, and Otomitl. These were all founders of cities. And yes, the place where men became gods, Teotihuacan. Dave.
Wow. I've heard of that town quite a lot. Patagon. The Patagons, or Patagonian giants, were a race of people whose first began to appear in early European accounts of the then little-known region and coastline of Patagonia. They were supposed to have exceeded at least double normal human height. Remember, we measure everything in human scale, so that's twice our size. Some accounts giving heights of 12 to 15 feet. That's 3.7 or 4.6 meters or more. Because, they saw them as they went past in their boats, so an estimation of the size is, they looked frightening to the eye, being so far away and still seeing them so tall. Tales of these people would take a hold over European concepts of the region for some 250 years. First mention of these people came from the voyage of Ferdinand Magellan and his crew, who claimed to have seen them while exploring the coastline of South America en route to the Maluku Islands in their circumnavigation of the world in the 1520s. Antonio Pigafetta, one of the expedition's few survivors, not today but then, and the chronicler of Magellan's expedition, wrote in his account about their encounter with natives twice a normal person's height. And this looks like it's a quote. One day,
correct,
we suddenly saw a naked man of giant stature on the shore of the port, dancing, singing, and throwing dust on his head. The Captain General, Magellan, sent one of 4 men to the giant so that he might perform the same actions as a sign of peace. Having done that, the man led the giant to an islet where the Captain General was waiting. When the giant was in the Captain General's and our presence, he marvelled greatly. He made signs with one finger raised upward, not the sign that we would use today, believing that we had come from the sky. He was so tall that we reached only to his waist, and he was well proportioned. End of quote. Pigafetta also recorded that Magellan had bestowed on these people the name Patagao, i.e. Patagon, or Patagoni, or Pigafetta's Italian plural. But he had not further elaborated on his reasons for doing so. The original word would probably be in Ferdinand Magellan's native Portuguese, which would be Patagao, or the Spanish of his men, Patagon. Since Pigafetta's time, the assumption that this derived from the pata, or foot, took hold, and Patagonia was interpreted to mean land of the big feet. However, this etymology remains questionable, since amongst other things, the meaning of the suffix "gon" is unclear. It is now understood that the etymology refers to a literary character in the Spanish novel of the early 16th century. But, okay, so that was 1520s, right? Nevertheless, the name Patagonia stuck, and did the notion that the local inhabitants were giants. Early maps of the New World afterwards would sometimes attach the label Regio Gigantum, or Gigantum, which is region of giants, to the area. In 1579, Francis Drake's ship chaplain, Francis Fletcher, wrote about meeting very tall Patagonians. In the 1590s, later on, Anthony Nivet claimed he had seen dead bodies 12 feet, 3.7 meters long, in Patagonia. Also in the 1590s, William Adams, an Englishman aboard a Dutch ship rounding the Tierra del Fuego, reported a violent encounter between the ship's crew and unnaturally tall natives. In 1776, a rumour leaked out upon their return to the United Kingdom that the crew of the HMS Dolphin, captured by Commodore John Byron, had seen a tribe of 9... Captained by Commodore, thank you, John Byron, had seen a tribe of 9 foot tall, 2.7 metre natives in Patagonia when they passed by there on their circumnavigation of the globe. However, when a newly edited revised account of the voyage came out in 1773, the Patagonians were recorded as being 6 feet 6 inches, nearly 2 meters. Very tall, but by no means giants. These people, there's the beginning of censorship, Mickey, right there. Look at that. The people encountered by
100%.
Byron, 100%, were in all likelihood the Tool, hang on, I'll get it. The Tehuelches, indigenous to the region. Later writers consider the Patagonian giants to have been a hoax, or at least an exaggeration and mistelling of the earlier European accounts of the region. These accounts may also refer to the Selknam people. A photo of a 7-foot-tall Selknam Ona is the name, man can be found in the Library of the Congress.
So, just to for a second here, right? So, in 1766, which isn't that long ago, the first report was of someone 9 foot tall, 2.7 meters, right? But then, it's when it came out 6 or 7 years later, or a revised edition. So they hadn't gone again. They just edited what they had already published.
That's right.
And I think 6 feet 6 inches just makes it more palatable, right? But before that, from the 1520s, for the next 220 years, there are stories of these gigantic people in Patagonia, in Tierra del Fuego, which is right at the tip of the South American continent, right at the tip. In fact, pretty tough to sail there at the storms. Anyway, point is, there are 2 ways you can go when you go around the Earth. Before they had the Panama Canal and the Suez Canal, you could go around the Cape of Good Hope.
That's right.
Or you can go around the Cape of what was it? Kap der Guten Hoffnung und Freiland. Yeah. So sorry, it's the tip of Africa or the tip of South America. That's it. The only 2 ways. These are the only 2 you can go, right? And Cape Horn, that's it. Cape Horn is in Africa, and Cape of Good Hope is in South America. But the point is, these are the only 2 ways you can go, and it's very hard to go there. But for 220 years, the reports are consistent, okay, about rather gigantic people. Now, why haven't we got any skeletons, this and that? Well, you know what? We're going to come to that in a second. I mean, this is like a lot of show notes here, but we come to that not in a second, in a few weeks, I guess we'll come to it. The Smithsonian might very well be holding some of that evidence. And again, if you bury someone, or if they're burned, we don't know what their funeral rites are, right? We have no idea. You may not find skeletons necessarily, right? And what happened to those people? Well, they were probably killed. They probably died of the smallpox, like most American natives. They died of the smallpox as well, right? And if they did die of the smallpox or some of the measles, then their bodies would have been burned, most likely. Okay. So I go with reports that span 220 years over the revised edition of a journal that, to me, it looks like Dave said, a bit of creative censorship, right? And then it was decided, later writers considered the Patagonian giants to have been a hoax. But like most debunking stories, not backing it up with anything credible, except for stating, oh, well, Mackie, clearly giants are a figment of someone's imagination. It has to be like that, because no sensible person would ever think there could be giants. Come on. The experts tell us, well, we didn't think there'd be dwarfs either, and there they are, Homo forensic. Little people, 4 feet tall, fully grown human beings, 4 feet tall. If that's not a dwarf, I don't know what is, okay? And why do we have such a hard time accepting these things? It is really quite upsetting. But that's just me ranting. Norse mythology, which is much more interesting. Dave, much more interesting. Norse mythology, giants appear in numerous myths of Northern Europe. The giants roam a place called Jotunheim, located in Midgard, the center of the 3-tiered Norse universe. They There they dwelt in a huge castle called Utgard. In Norse mythology, the Jotun, or Jötnar in Old Norse, which is a cognate with Etin, are often opposed to the gods. Yet again, Dave. Yet again opposed to the gods. While often translated as giants, most are described as being roughly human-sized. Some are portrayed as huge, such as frost giants, fire giants, and even mountain giants. The giants are the origin of most of various monsters in Norse mythology. And in the eventual battle of Ragnarok, the giants will storm Asgard and fight them until the world is destroyed. Even so, the gods themselves were related to the giants by many marriages. And there are giants such as Aegir, Loki, yeah, that's right, Loki, Mimir, and Skadi, who bear little difference in status. The chief god Odin was the great-grandson of the giant Ymir. Norse mythology also holds that the entire world of men was created from the flesh of Ymir, a giant of cosmic proportions. And I like you to think back to the Jain people who've just told us that we were like 6 miles tall, right? At some point. The flesh of Ymir, a giant of cosmic proportions, which name is considered by some to share a root with the name Yama of Indo-Iranian mythology. Yama, Ymir, Yama, all pointing back to much older mythology. An old Icelandic legend says that 2 night-prowling giants, a man and a woman, were traversing the fjord near Drangey Island with their cow when they were surprised by the bright rays of daybreak. As a result of exposure to daylight, no less, all 3 were turned into stone. Drangey represents the cow, and Curling, supposedly the female giant, the name means old hag, is to the south of it. Karl, the male giant, was to the north of the island, but he disappeared long ago. A Bergrisi, the traditional protector of southwest Iceland, or southwestern Iceland, appears as a supporter on the coat of the arms of Iceland. Bergrisi actually means mountain giant, Bergriese. It's very similar to German. Norse myths, like Greek myths, say that the gods fought and conquered the race of giants. Yet the gods and the giants were not always enemies. Friendship and even marriage could occur between them. Male deities mated with female giants. The mother of the thunder god Thor was a giantess named Jord, for example. However, the gods violently resisted all attempts by giants to mate with goddesses. Now, that's a bit of bigotry for you, isn't it? The giant Hrungnir built a wall around Asgard, the home of the gods, and for payment desired the goddess Freya. But he received only a crushing blow from Thor's hammer. You can't date our women, but we can date yours. Many myths concerning Thor's conflict with the giants. Right, there's many myths. In one tale, he journeyed to Utgard to challenge the giants. The giants beat Thor and his companions at several tests of strength, but only by using trickery. In one contest, Thor lost a wrestling match to an old woman who was in fact Age, which overcomes. Though the gods were not always good and the giants were not always bad, the struggle between the 2 groups constitutes one of the underlying themes of Norse mythology and often symbolizes the struggle of good against evil in a simplified world. And again, I'd like to point out here yet again, even to the even in danger of being redundant, ancient mythology and ancient stories and ancient texts are a lot more complex than their more modern equivalents. And my example is the Old Testament, a simpler and primitive text if you compare it to the original Sumerian texts. Right? This is the same, right? The original stories of the giants and the gods in Norse myth, very complex, very, very hard to understand, very hard to follow, and much more believable that way. Right? Whereas once you distill it down through the ages and it becomes a tale of morality, good versus evil. It's like when Junior said that the evildoers and excess of evil. People understand that a lot better. It's much easier to digest than having complex philosophical and theological discussions. Good versus evil. I get that. Thank you very much, Dave.
Yeah, that brings us to Roman mythology. It's not very long, but it's important. Several Jupiter giant columns have been found in Germania, Superior. These were crowned with a statue of Jupiter, typically on horseback, defeating or trampling down a giant, often depicted as a snake. These are restricted to the area of southwestern Germany, western Switzerland, French Jura, and Alsace.
Yeah, that's right. And again, the Romans would have taken most of their mythology and lock, stock, and barrel from the Greeks. Not all of it, but certainly quite a few.
And dragged it back to Rome.
We're going to take this in turn. The next 100%, my friend, 100%. In fact, the great educators and teachers of that age were in fact Greeks, and it was considered to be, I guess, if you were educated, you could actually speak Greek. Right? That was the big thing for the Romans, in the way that we today learn ancient Greek and Latin, if you consider educated. Now we're going to take these paragraphs in turn, because there are other European mythologies we're going to go through here, and there's obviously very many. So in folklore from all over Europe, giants were believed to have built the remains of previous civilizations. Saxo Grammaticus, for example, argues that giants had to exist because nothing else would explain the large walls, stone monuments, and statues that we now know were the remains of Roman constructions. Similarly, the Old English poem Seafarer speaks of the high stone walls that were the work of giants. Even natural geologic features, such as the massive basalt columns of the Giant's Causeway on the coast of Northern Ireland, were attributed to construction by giants. Giants provided the least complicated explanation for such artifacts. The same has been said about the Jupiter Temple in Baalbek. I know I always go back there. Nobody would argue that the Jupiter Temple was built by the Romans. 100%. The foundational platform, I contend here, was not. And that's where you have the 1,000-ton megaliths embedded. Medieval romances such as the Spanish Amadís de Gaula feature giants as antagonists, or, rarely, as allies. This is parodied famously in Cervantes' Don Quixote, when the title character attacks a windmill, believing it to be a giant. This is the source of the phrase tilting at windmills. It's a beautiful it's a beautiful phrase which describes actions of complete and total futility, not fertility, but rather futility. Dave?
Tales of combat with giants were a common feature in the folklore of Wales, Scotland, and Ireland. Celtic giants also figure in Breton and Arthurian romances, perhaps as a reflection of the Nordic and the Slavic mythology that arrived on the boats, and from this source they spread into the heroic tales of Torquato Tasso and Ludovico Ariosto and their follower Edmund Spenser in the small Scottish village of Kinloch Rannoch. A local myth to this effect concerns a local hill that apparently resembles the head, shoulders, and torso of a man that has therefore been termed the sleeping giant. Apparently the giant will waken only if a specific musical instrument is played near the hill. Other giants, perhaps descended from earlier Germanic mythology, feature as frequent opponents of Dietrich von Bern in medieval German tales. In later portrayals, Dietrich himself and his fellow heroes also became giants. Meki.
Many giants in English folklore were noted for their stupidity. A giant who had quarreled with the mayor of Shrewsbury went to bury the city with dirt. However, he met a shoemaker carrying shoes to repair, and the shoemaker convinced the giant that he had worn out all the shoes coming from Shrewsbury, and so it was too far to travel. Other English stories told of how giants threw stones at each other. This was used to explain many great stones on the landscape. Giants figure in a great many fairy tales and folklore stories, such as Jack the Giant Killer, the giant who had no heart in his body, Nick Snored Nothing, Robin Hood, and the Prince of Aragon, Young Ronald, and Paul Bunyan. Ogres and trolls are humanoid creatures, sometimes of gigantic stature, that occur in various sorts of European folklore. An example of another Slavic folklore giant is Rübezahl, which is one I grew up with. A kind giant from Wendish folklore who lived in the Giant Mountains, nowadays on the Czech-Polish border. Additionally, mythological beings which are not necessarily considered giants in the common sense can be characterized by a giant-like body size. For example, the Bergmönch, a German mountain spirit. In Kalevala, Antero Vipunen is a giant shaman that possesses mighty spells dating to the creation. Epic hero Väinämöinen, that was a tough one even for me, wow, sets out to learn these spells from him, but Vipunen is buried underground, and when Väinämöinen digs him out, he is accidentally swallowed by Vipunen. Väinämöinen then forces Vipunen to submit and sing the spells out by hammering his insides. An analysis by Matti Havio is that Vipunen is not physically large, but his familiar animal, the astral form, is a whale. The depiction is not found in the majority of Finnish original stories and most probably originates from the books compiled by Elias Lönnrot. Väinämöinen. Wow, what a
goodness
name.
Chicken. Oh boy, I'm sorry if there's any Finnish people listening. Okay, so alleged fossil evidence, and this should take us right at the break. Through the centuries, certain archaeologists have searched for fossil evidence of a race of giants. Alleged evidence includes, point one, the giants of Castelnau, Nur, estimated at 11 feet 6 inches tall, which is about 3.5 meters, discovered by the anthropologist Georges Avacha de la Polge at the Bronze Age cemetery at Castelnau-le-Les, France, in the winter of 1890. Mekki, next point.
1894, press accounts mention a discovery of bones of human giants unearthed at a prehistoric cemetery in Montpellier, France. Skulls, 28 inches, 31 and 32 inches in circumference, were reported alongside other bones of gigantic proportions, which indicated they belonged to a race of men or women between 10 and 15 feet in height. The bones were reportedly sent to the Paris Academy for further study.
The remains of the Sai Tikar, or Sai-I, a legendary tribe of red-haired cannibalistic giants, were allegedly found in 1911 by guano miners in Nevada's Lovelock Cave. However, the size and nature of the fossil remains has been disputed by Adrian Mayer in the book Fossil Legends of the First Americans. Mekki, that's about all we can do for today.
That's it? Well, that's it, mate. Yeah.
Is it? Let's just round this out, right?
Yeah.
So we have.
So what we have.
Go ahead.
Go. Yeah.
No, you go.
There you go. Okay, fine. Look, we've seen now that there seems to be an all-pervasive presence of giants throughout all the different cultures in the world, right? And yes, we've seen people detracting from it. We've seen people making edits to stories that were going for 220 years, and then one day they decide, that doesn't sound reasonable. Let's make it something else. 6'6", they're just very, very tall. And next week we are going to look at Africa, the African giant legends, Dave. And yes, it would be easy to ascribe these giant buildings and whatnot to giants. But maybe there were giants. Let's just for a second here suspend our disbelief and just bear with us, because we've said it before and we're going to say it again. Everything is connected, and you have to go right back to the beginning to look at the proper evidence, the original texts if you can, the primary sources. Everything else is just a story.
Just have a look at how big all the doorways were.
Mm-hmm.
Just on its own. Do nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
Look at all the big doorways, all the ancient structures. Got to be something in that. Mm-hmm. Thanks knowing there, these two Aussies. The music's just about to start. I may as well say, wrap it up and say, thank you very much for listening to The Shiny Side Out with Dave and Mekki. stay tuned for Jer Bear's Roundtable. Be a part of radio. Be a part of it. Do what we did. We called in, and we were offered a show, and this is the 8th year. Thank you very much, Nighthawk, for the platform and for putting up with us. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And by the way, subscribe to the archives. Also, if you can, find us on YouTube. Our archives go back further than the station's ones. And, message us there. Get us through the website also, Shiny Side Out. And there's the music that I can see. Have a great night and a great weekend. We'll see you next week.